Well, hello everybody, and welcome on what, in my bit of the world, is a sunny Wednesday morning for our next session in this series about grant fund uh, development and delivery. I hope you're all well. Just for those who didn't join us last time, I'm Rod Howells. I am part of a company called Big Innovation. We're very heavily involved in the world of grants and business development and business growth, probably over 20 plus years in this area, and have been involved in reading and looking at more grants and being part of grants than I care to imagine. With me on the call, and if you like, the sponsor and the director of this project is Justin Davis, who's, I think you can see on the call, from Net Zero Industry Wales, and that's the organisation that's organising and pulling this series together to help people looking at grants in all shapes and forms. So, Justin, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, and we'll get started.
Yeah, thanks, Rod. Hi, everyone, and thanks to your attendance today. So my name's Justin Davis. I'm a Research and Projects Manager at Net Zero Industry Wales. And yeah, so my background is mostly with innovative SMEs, working in kind of sustainability and zero carbon kind of industries, with lots of kind of reliance on early stage innovative grant funding, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's looking forward to talking through. Well, I'm looking forward to this whole workshop series, but or webinar series. But yeah, looking forward to the writing process side of things today as well. So
yeah, great. So we're going to just start a little intro for you guys to understand a little bit more about Net Zero Industry Wales, and then we'll get into the content, which is really focused today on that grant writing process to put together the most compelling bid that you can when you're looking at putting a grant in for funds. So I'm going to just hand over to you, Justin, to just run through the next couple of slides.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Net Zero Industry Wales was founded in 2022, well, working to help industry within Wales to transition to net zero by 2050. As you can see, we're trying to empower businesses in Wales to build a greener futures. And as part of this, we are the cluster management office for the South West Wales Net Zero Launchpad, which is what is providing. So this is funded through Innovate UK, UKRI, in partnership with the local councils in the region, as well as some delivery partners, of which Big Innovation and ROD is one. And that is where the funding for these sessions is coming from. So delivering funds around industrial net zero, but trying to leverage further funds into Wales in particular. So yeah.
Great.
And the three kind of pillars that we're working off of on the Net Zero Launchpad are business support, industry outreach, and academic outreach. So really trying to focusing on the business support here in terms of leveraging as much government funding, grant funding into Wales as possible. So yeah, thanks, Rod, and I'll pass over to you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so for those who just where we are in the series, the first session had been around really identifying and finding grants and things to consider when looking at taking on a grant as a business. What does it mean? What are the pros and cons? Today, we're going to really concentrate on the application process. So this is looking at, you found something you think you can really go for and developing the best proposal possible. And what I want to do is share some hints and tips, point out some areas which can be some traps that people can fall into, which we can help you avoid, and really how to put together the best proposal, because we see an awful lot. We often can speak with companies who've got a great idea, but once they're starting to try and put it into paper, they don't always give it the best proposal possible. So hopefully there'll be things that you can take away today which you can apply yourselves to really get those good applications. Do use the chat function through the day, through the session. Please put any questions or comments in there. We'll be capturing those as we go, and we'll try and answer every question that we can. Probably do a talk for about 30 minutes plus a little bit maybe, and then have a open discussion where we'll go through some of those questions. So that's going to be the format. Next couple of sessions coming up, just so it's on your radar. Next one, we're going to be looking at how grants are managed. We've got a good panel coming to the next session, people who've had grants and things that they can understand about what to how to make those applications, that project run as smoothly as possible. We've also got a monitoring officer who comes in, who helps review those types of grants and helps manage those through, which will be great. So if you do watch out for the next session. And then finally, we'll be looking about further funding, further opportunities to take your innovations forward once you've had that first grant. But today is really on the writing process. I saw a note in the chat just saying about slides. Yeah, they're on their way. We will be sending them out, the one from the previous session. This is recorded. There'll be a recording available, and all the slides we'll use are going to be shared as well. Okay, so I'm going to look at the grant writing process today. What makes a good grant? What way to approach the writing process? But also, I'm going to concentrate on some time on the financials that you will be putting in. That can be really quite challenging and tricky for some people who are new to the grant process. And they say we'll then have a Q&A. Before I dive into it, just a couple of things which might be really useful for you for further info. The world we're in is very much Innovate UK grants. What I'm going to talk about will be applicable to all types of grants that are available. But just for sort of clarity, we will concentrate on Innovate grants because that's the world we're in. Here's quite a useful guide that is available for people looking at Innovate grants that can help look at how to go about that process of applying for a grant. I'm pulling on some of the information from this through the talk. I'm also using some of the sort of our own experience from reviewing grants and the work that we've done. So that's available. When you're looking at a grant, and I'm sure on the call we've got a lot of people who've been in this world. I always think of it as an exam. You usually got about 10 questions, scored questions. They're usually around 400 words, which I will show can be deceptively. It can be deceptive to say that there's 400 words. Actually, sometimes the amount of information that's needed in those 400 words is quite challenging. So that's where you've got to be quite refined on and disciplined on what you put into those answers. You can eat up 400 words just warming up, and you often see that with people's answers. They're sort of typing away, and then they start to try and cram in the answer to the question in the last words. Really draw yourself back before you start writing to make sure that you're using every one of those 400 words when you're giving your answers. So if you add that up, usually there's 10 questions. You've got 4,400 words to write, which really is going to be punchy and to the point to to create a compelling argument why you should have those funds. The other bit I'd like to just mention in that is you also want to make sure that there's a continuity of argument of position through those questions. Sometimes you can see things jump around when you read them, and it can be read as it can become disjointed. Make sure that there's a continuity through each of the questions on your approach. So this is part of the reviewing process that you'll need to do as you go through, because sometimes your thinking evolves as you're doing those questions. Go back, reiterate, make sure that it stands up. So go in with that mindset. How do I get the most marks here? And you think, well, who are the people who are giving me these marks? Who are these assessors? Well, in the Innovate world, who receives this? They're usually they're independent from Innovate. They're picked from a panel, usually on their expertise on the field for that topic. So whether it's AI or net zero, they'll be from a pool of experts. They will be often anonymous to us. We wouldn't know who would have that. They will be given a scoring matrix of how to look at this, so that there will be a structure around how they'll be reviewing the applications. They'll be looking for that in this world of Innovate. They'll be looking for the novelty. They'll be looking about how to address the challenges and how that can be set out. And they will be scoring. So they'll often have a scoring criteria. And there's usually about 5. Sometimes there's 3, sometimes 5, depending on it. So those are the people you are communicating with when you're putting your application in. Little tip for people out there, and it's not the case on every single application, but for those familiar with it, you'll see these tabs. These tabs are on Innovate grants. Usually you have a summary about what it's about, which is the headline. Eligibility, do you align? Is it for SMEs? Is it for research organizations? The scope will give you, again, the real range of what they're looking for, which you really need to know. Dates, obvious about when the times are. In the how to apply is your guide to how this is going to be worked. This can be quite a long, extensive piece. Right down at the bottom of that tab, you can often find the assessors, how it's going to be assessed, and the guides that the assessors will be used. That is really useful because that can show how they will be scoring against each of the questions. So have a look to see if that is available. If it's not, there will be one being used against each of the tenders. So use that. So I make sure I've read all of this, read all of the info, looked at that guide before pulling an application together. This is a summary of one of those areas, so you can see the types of scoring that will be used against the questions that you've got. So this is one that was, what's the business need, technological challenge, or market opportunity driving your innovation? As you can see here, they're looking for, you want to be in that top category, clearly describe a compelling motivation for the project from the perspective of the businesses involved. Clear understanding of the nearest state of the art available. So there already, you're trying to put in a strong argument for why yours is better than anything else that's currently available, and showing a clear understanding of why there's a difference there. Going down to the sort of 7 to 8 marks. Now, it's hard to say what's the difference between good and compelling. That's where you are going to have to be very clear on your answer to get into those top marks. Can you articulate that? So go into each question thinking with this sort of mindset about how do I get maximum marks for this answer? And the best way to do this, is to prepare early and to reiterate and check and maybe have externals people to what you're writing to look at that, to make sure it's clearly articulating that point. So yeah, one of the key things I'm going to drive home today is make sure you've done your homework before you start. This makes it much easier. It's a challenge in itself to pull these together. Often people are trying to pull the information together as they're writing the grants with the deadline coming up. The more you can have in your pocket beforehand, the better. Know who your delivery team's going to be. Really read those questions, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail, to make sure you are answering what is required of you. Often I can see people start writing and they're telling you what they want to tell you, not what the question is asking. So be disciplined on answering the question. If you're writing as a team in the collaborative, agree the narrative, write down the key points that are going to be put there. I tend to think one writer is the best, with others reviewing. Depending, sometimes there may be certain topic areas where someone's got to write it, but someone who's the master editor is the best to continue that narrative through the application. Be clear on what is the innovative step that you're doing. That will be always looked at. Have worked out your finances beforehand. How many people are involved in this? How long? What duration? What equipment might you need? And particularly what subcontractors or purchases you might need. So you've got the quotes there. Excuse my cough, sorry about that. So this is the stuff you need beforehand. Little checklist for everyone, and again, send this through. Make sure you've got the team. Who are the right people in and outside your business? Piece I think people fall down on a lot can be that market research evidence, and particularly the competitor analysis. I don't think they, as that example showed, showing where you stand out against the state of the art. Now it can be quite, you could have quite revolutionary innovation, but you've got to show what's happening at the moment and why your innovation is that much better. Is it cheaper, more sustainable, easier to use, opens up a new market? What are the things that make you stand out, and what evidence have you got to prove that that's the case? Scope your project plan. Make sure you've got the milestones, make sure you've got clear roles and responsibilities set out in that plan, and then that's something you can use to cost what you're going to do. All of this stuff can be put into the bid. You know, there'll be opportunities for appendix in a number of places, but this will also be the frameworks that you will be able to write a compelling answer on your bid. You should have this for any projects you're doing anyway. So having these ready to go just helps that writing process. A realistic commercialization strategy, that can often be missed. People can be concentrating on the technology and the technological development they're doing, not showing how that will then be realized and taken to market. Often that comes across in weaker applications as an afterthought or vague. That needs some real thought to come up with a strong answer. And all of this needs evidence behind it. Why? To justify that you as a team have what it takes to do this. Risk assessment, identifying risks and then mitigating strategies. Again, in the matrix, very useful for the tender, for the grant applications. Again, builds confidence, builds understanding, and have those costings in place for it. If you're armed with all of those things, you're in a really good place to write a good bid. So get those ready. Often you hear, and it is the case, some grants come out with quite short windows of time. But if you've got these in place ready, you can be on the front foot when you're writing them. If you're trying to do this in the timescales that a project comes out, there's a lot to be done to get to a strong application. Okay, before I go into the nitty-gritty of the writing process, just another statement, there's a lot of areas where you can get help. People tend to hold this close to themselves for too early and for too long. Do reach out for support. There's a lot of support we can help through the Net Zero Industry Wales for grants that we're involved in. Innovate UK Business Connect, Innovate UK Business Growth, all can help with looking at the grant writing process, selection and development. What we do find with that is people ask too late. With 24 hours to go, could you review our application? We can review it, but we find it's hard to then develop it. All those things I've just talked about are the things you should be looking at earlier on. You need a good 2 weeks, I think, to write it with all of those things in place to write a good application. So time is the main secret to a good application. Okay, getting into applications themselves, they tend to have the same sort of structure, particularly the Innovate grants. I'll talk about the top level, and I'm going to pick on one particular question just to emphasize a point. Sometimes these first three questions are slightly forgotten about by people putting the grants together, putting a grant together. But I do think it's worth noting, particularly the project summary, as a component to write well. This is the first thing anyone will read. It'll be the first part of the grant that an assessor will look at. So you really want it to grab people's attention. You want to almost set confidence here. You want to make sure it's very easy to understand. You don't need to put all the detail in it by any means, but you need to make sure that people are excited almost by what you've written and want to read more. So do spend some time writing that first piece. It's not scored, so people tend to not think of that, but from a psychological point of view, I think getting that right is really important. I tend to write it, and then I would look at doing the full, do the full application, then come back to it again a number of times to make sure that it's as punchy as possible and that flow works through the application. The description, that's the bit that is the only bit that gets published. So again, think about that one. Well, if you're successful with grant, this is the bit that would be published and people would see. So no confidential information in there. Make it clear, and as much as if you were talking to someone about your project in a public area, what would you want to be put into the public domain? Next one on the scope. Just be very clear about why your grant hits the scope of this well, and make sure you show why it's eligible for the grant. The common area here is sometimes people get over elaborate with their grant application and slip outside of the scope of the grant itself, either in timing or in the amount of finance that they're looking at. So don't come a cropper at the very beginning. It happens more times than it should that people start to fall out of the scope. So keep understanding why you hit that target on the scope piece.
And right. just to jump in on that as well. I mean, even just in the net zero competitions that we're running, there are organizations that kind of on paper are 100% would be great fits for the competition, or like you can definitely tell that they are in scope, but because they've not kind of checked that box with what they've written in the kind of scope aspect, they can't move on to being scored. So it is like it's really, really crucial to kind of make sure that is that's right, really. Yeah.
Thanks very much. It's surprising, isn't it? You think that's the straightforward one, but people fall down on that.
Yeah.
Okay, Right. Another just a moment to. There's also an increasing amount of applications which are looking around the diversity and inclusivity within the biz. And I think some organizations do struggle with answering this question well. Again, it's not scored, but it's something that's becoming more and more important, both as a standalone maybe question or through a bid. It could be that that's part of the scoring criteria. So here's a couple of resources around the sort of diversity agenda, which again, when we share, you can dive into. But do consider this. I mean, sometimes a weak answer there is worse than no answer. You see, oh, we've got a woman on our staff. You say, oh, well, that's fantastic. It can be pretty poor. Maybe that's why we're asking these questions are getting asked. So do think about that. Consider it in the round. Consider it about it in your approach. Consider it in your strategy, and it will pay benefits through with your application. Okay. This I thought was a great example of a question. I'm not expecting you to read all of that text here. You're not going to have to answer this one. Note, this is a question that is asking for 400 words. So you think, oh, 400 words, I can knock out 400 words. No problem. The main question to this is, what is your target market and what is your strategy for securing the market opportunity you have identified, including your route to market and commercialization of the project's outputs? That's asking quite a lot already in one question. It's asking target market, it's asking how you're going to, your route to market, secure your strategy for securing the opportunity that you've identified, and what your plan is to take that forward. In that bit, number of times I see people just answering this question, okay? And there's a challenge of just answering that question. What people don't tend to do on a normal response is look at these bullet points, because that explain your answer with these bullet points in applications is really important. This is a bit of an extreme example I'm using to make the point. But here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bullet points, 7 different aspects to that question. And the reviewer will be looking against each of those questions. So in 400 words, we've got 7 bullet points. Roughly, give or take, you've got 50 words per bullet point to hit. I think of it in that way. How am I going to answer each of those bullet points? And how do I make sure that it's clear to someone who's reading their 100th application, 200th application, that I've done that? How do I make this easy as possible for that person to review and score? Concentrate on each one, make sure you directly answer it across, make sure you get each aspect of those questions. Use some of that language back. So you say, for example, the export potential for our project outputs is this. Any barriers to entry which we need to overcome are these, and this is how we're overcoming them. Really make it easy for the assessor. Think about that crib sheet, score sheet that they'll have that you'll be marketing against. The biggest mistake I see is people taking that first question at the top and trying to answer that and writing away happily with their 400 words and maybe answering 3 of the bullet points, 2 of the bullet points. And they've lost all those marks on the other bits. So it's about really tight language, really good evidence, clarity against each of those. If you take anything from the session today, take that advice, because the number of people who fall down and give away, lose marks that they could benefit from is huge on that area. I'm not going to drill into all of this. You can have this, but you start to think about all of the things that I would want to put into that answer. What's the addressable market? How do I segment it? What's my roadmap to it? Who's experienced the problem? Where's the evidence of this? How do I build that in? What ways can I share my understanding and really make it condense on that? And where's the evidence base? So referencing reports that people could look at. Show why yours stands out against the competitors. That often is lost. The worst answer I ever get is, there's nothing like this on the market. No, this is unique. It's a bit of a cop-out answer. It may be unique, but you've got to show what it's unique against. It doesn't build confidence, that answer. Show how in this world yours works. Understand the IP position. You don't have to elaborate hugely on this. You can say we're looking at patents. We're in the process of having a patent protected. We're going to secure it with know-how, trade secrets, but acknowledge it. Why you can operate. There's a huge amount that you need to get into this answer, which can be, it could be fooled by thinking it's just 400 words that you need to put in. How you'll take it to market. You working with a trusted strategic partner who's got access to that particular market and the distribution link, and that you've got an agreement in place with them, or you've got members of your team who've worked in that particular market and have already sold product into that area. What are the ways you're going to do it, etc. All of this in your 400 words. And you're sort of showing why this is a great use of a grant because of what you can make happen. I'm not going to drill into every single question that you'll get on the grant application. We've got some information, again, which I'll share on different questions, things from risk assessment, things like identifying need. We'll send that in a sort of extended pack. But I hope you get the key point here. Read the question well. Look for those sub-questions, because that's actually where the marks are. And refine and work on that text. So it's really punchy. Yeah, I think I've said it enough times now. Cover every bullet point. Do it in the order that they come out. Even if you sort of feel like it should be different, I would stick to that order because someone's looking at it in that way. Tick them off when you've covered them. Make sure you've said, right, I've done that. Make sure it works with the narrative. And don't be tempted to add things in that you think you want to add in. Be careful on that, because sometimes you can be using up valuable words which aren't linked to this the marking criteria. So next bit, just that's a sort of technique to look at every question in detail. I would be very directive on the way you answer questions. So you're showing as direct response, concise, short sentences, clear language. Be very careful of using any jargon and abbreviations. If there's bits you need to technically explain, do explain them, but keep that very punchy. The people may understand the area. They may not be familiar. Every industry, every business has its own language, its own abbreviations. So be clear on that. I think one of the other things that we find, and I think it could be a national trait, is people can be a little bit self-deprecating. They can be a little bit cautious. I think in tone, you have to be more bullish than you might be if you were speaking to a colleague. You need to show the statements of intent and strength in there. So a stronger language. Don't overstate it, but be stronger in what you say. So we will do this. This will achieve X, Y. Don't avoid the sort of mights, maybes, coulds in this. Avoid it looking like you're doing it in a maybe a sort of scientific way of this is an experiment, I would be being more bullish in what you're right to build that confidence. It comes through, but always show evidence for your statements. We can get into this market because so and so has 20 years experience of working in this area. We have seen this market because we've got a letter of intent from a key player who would like to purchase this if we're successful. These sort of things is what you want to be putting across in your application. So yeah, aim for that score. Think about that scoring on each of the questions, and can you do it? Or try and score it yourself. Try and get someone else to score it for you. Does this come across? And keep it in those areas. As I said, if it has got one of those assessor guides, that can be gold dust for when you're looking at your application. Okay, so that's really the tone and the writing. The last bit I'm going to talk about really is the financial planning. And again, actually, before I go on, Justin, is there anything else you think on the writing process and the tackling of questions that I might have missed, or you want to emphasize?
No, I don't. Well, I don't think so. I think it's a really good overview of kind of what to be thinking about. I think the checklist that you have a few slides ago was really good, really important, to just make sure. I guess the kind of constant thing that we see is really good projects that just kind of aren't answering the questions in the way that they're framed to be answering the questions, and it's really well, you've mentioned that multiple times already as well, and I think just to continue highlighting that is it's from our point of view, when we get a really good project that either can't be scored because it hasn't addressed the scope aspect properly, or gets a low score, but you can see that it's just because the questions were answered properly. It's just so crucial. And I think the other one is just at least with the like net zero. Well, just take advantage of the resources that are available to support you in terms of the writing process, and ask for help early, really. Yeah, because I guess at the end of the day, like, the funders are they want to issue the grants into the best projects, and so if you have a good project, then you just need to get as much help as possible, really.
Yeah. I think that's a fair point, isn't it? Usually, and knowing people who are managing funds, their aim is to get rid of the fund, isn't it? They want the success is a whole bunch of really good applications that they're funding that can help go forward. That's ultimately the aim. This isn't a trick exercise. They're trying to get to a point where they can give those funds to them and build confidence that the applications that are going in will deliver. So
Sorry, just Jay asked a question as well that we might answer before going into financial planning, just about general advice for people in the not-for-profit space, providing solutions for the greater public good. How can we complete grant funding sections that are heavily focused on marketability and profit? How can we justify the funds if we aren't profit focused? I mean, yeah, I can kind of jump in on that one. So a previous organization that I was working with was a not-for-profit, and actually Net Zero Industry Wales is a not-for-profit as well. And I think there's two things. So some funds just simply won't be available, won't be open to not-for-profit organizations, and that's just kind of the reality of how it is. The other thing, I mean, from our point of view, it was always about, in previous organizations, and my experience now is, even if you're a not-for-profit, if you have an innovative idea that is generating kind of revenue, well, at least that. So that's kind of the not-for-profits I was in. Is there's still a revenue generation aspect, but then that revenue generation was being used to further develop kind of further impact, I guess, kind of the community and kind of the social aspects of what we're going on. So it's highlighting that, which I think is quite innovative in and of itself. And I think a lot of funders like to see that kind of not-for-profit angle in that. But I think it also just depends on the fund that you pick. If
I think you're right. I think the first bit for everyone, we were maybe talking a little bit on the last session. You've got to try and make sure there's a fit with what you're trying to do with the grant. So looking at that scope and saying, actually, is this working for us? You know, are we trying to fit a round peg in a square hole? But I think on the counter, I think not-for-profits and if you can show the impact that you're going to be giving, and the development and the adoption dispersal of that innovation, then that can stand out really well. So it's articulating those elements.
And fundamentally, that's the commercialization, quote unquote, is the kind of wider impact rather than kind of turning a profit. So anyway, I hope that helps.
Good. Okay. Yeah. And we can talk further. And any questions, please keep putting them in the chat. I can't see them at the minute, so we'll do a sweep up of that at the end. Just to talk about financial planning, because again, I think this is a tricky bit for some. You can write the best sort of narrative, but you've got to make sure that you understand for your project where how to put the financials together. And I know often people can start with a narrative, work into the night writing their case, and then they think, right, I've got to get the numbers together now. And this is a whole challenge in itself. So, a couple of things. I think read the guidelines. It's always there. It's all clear. You can ask questions about the guidelines, about what's in scope and out of scope. And it's better to ask that early. What's the eligible costs? It's usually around anything that can be, things that are involved in that project will be an eligible cost of some format. Wider business expenses or indirect ones, less so. So it is around the project. It will be looking to support. Watch-alls for it are often, but not always, subcontractor costs. So external costs can sometimes be capped, so that the money is into the organisation who are coming up with the innovation. I think that can be fair enough, but I think sometimes it can be challenging where you're a small organisation and you're using a lot of externals to help something happen. It can impact how you structure your grant application. It's worth also understanding on the subcontractors, depending whether you want to have it as a collaborative bid or not. If you're in an application, it'll be on the cost of the labour, maybe with 20% overhead cost, whereas subcontractor costs, which are usually seen as separate, would be at commercial rates, and you'd have to sort of set why that would be, why you would pick those subcontractors, why they're appropriate for it to be involved in the project. So that's one thing to watch, because often a subcontractor cost computer can be higher than that. Capital costs, be really again, that's one I think you've got to be careful on, in that often it's for the use in that project. Often they don't usually pay for pieces of kit that then or you'll only get money towards its use within that project. So it's the value within the life of that project. You can't claim for the buying something which could then last for another 10 years and be used as a piece of production kit. Often there's rules around that you need to be sure of. I've put in employee costs. Do remember all the wider things that you might be needed in this. As I've said in here, things that often take longer or more time than you think. So do be realistic about which employees and how much time they'll be involved in a project. Remember the administrative costs of running the project, not just the time doing a specific challenge. I say everything takes longer. Find out beforehand, if you can, what may have extended lead times which could impact the project. Planning is a great one. You may be trying to do a project which is using a particular site which may need planning permission. If it's make it up 3-month project and you're going to have 8 weeks of waiting for planning permission, you may be struggling. Are there things like getting the planning permission beforehand so that's ready in place? Something that you need to do ready so that when the project starts, you can hit the ground running. Also, if there's key things that you need to purchase, what's the lead times on those? Specifically, if they're technically challenging or they're bespoke, what does that look like? And remember your holidays, remember Christmas, remember summer shutdowns. What are the things that could impact that when you're building your plans together? And the final point I was going to make was, once you've been putting that plan together, understand the mechanisms for claiming that grant. Often you've got to spend the money before you can claim it. And there can be time periods when you're claiming. It could be quarterly claims in arrears. So when is it that you'll get that cash back? And how does that look to your finances? And can you manage that? I don't know, Justin, if you've got any points on.
Yeah, I mean, I think just remembering that most funds, I think that most funds pay claims in arrears. So really, I mean, we covered this a bit last time, but I think this time as well, is making sure that you have if you're going to struggle with arrears payments, if that's going to impact your cash flow, then, or you don't have the cash reserves to kind of manage that, then make sure that you have some sort of mechanism in place even before you apply for the grant, or for the funds, to make sure that you can manage the expenditures and then the arrears payments to follow, because that is, I would say, a majority of grants pay claims in arrears, so you're gonna have to spend first and then claim it back. So it's just quite a crucial thing to remember. I think thinking early on about employee costs as well, and the administration of the grant is quite a crucial one as well. It's something that can be quite overlooked. So if you have an employee or you yourself are administering the grant through its lifetime, then that's time that won't be spent doing something else. And yeah, just make sure to really kind of take that into consideration, how much time it's going to take to administer the grant, really, and how that might impact everything. But yeah, it's
Yeah, and I think if you couldn't do a plan of when expense may go out, and the closer you could maybe for the money to go out compared to the claim period, the better it is. If you can be spending some money 1 week and the claim period, usually payment of grants is quick. You usually get the money back relatively very quickly. So just if you can plan it that way to minimize the exposure that you have, then that works. A project may not allow you that, but if you can, that's useful.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, yeah, we've worked with kind of subcontractors or kind of partners on it who they understand that it's a quarterly kind of payment schedule in terms of claims, and you work with your suppliers, etc., and let them know, like, this is what's going on, this is the funding that I have, can we kind of invoice, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks before the end of the quarter so I can get that out. It'll have to leave your bank account before the end of the quarter, and then you can put the claim in right away once the next quarter starts. So a lot of suppliers will work with you on that. So
okay, so I'm conscious I probably ran over the time I was going to a lot to this, and I want to make sure we've got time for questions. That was a sort of rapid tour through what it takes to put a good grant application. If you take anything away, read that question, read all those bullet points, because that's where I see so many people fall out. Get hold of the assessor notes if they're around. They're not always around, but they are really useful. Keep it simple about how you talk about the project, and make sure it's directly answering the question. Start with a clear sort of, but strong bang to set people in on the right bit. Then that leads through. You don't want people working hard to understand actually what the application is. I've read ones and I've got to the end of applications and I've read a lot and I've gone, I still don't actually understand what this is about. And I don't think that's on me. I think that's on whoever's applied it. Make sure it's understandable to the layman. Back up your statements with evidence. Acknowledge competition. There isn't a market if there isn't competition of some form. Acknowledge the IP position. Be clear on your route to market. Be clear where there may be risks, but show how you're going to reduce those, and be realistic with your timings and your resources and your costs. If anything, again, and give this process time. There can be a grant can be really valuable. It could be actually, the lifeline for an organisation, and it can make an innovation, make a project happen that wouldn't happen otherwise. So do give it the time that it needs to write these, which is easier said than done in a busy world, but often that you feel that people underestimate the time that's needed. You think, 4,000 words, I can bash that out. Actually, all the work you need to write the best 4,000 words is needed. Okay. That was it. So should twist over to some questions in the chat.
We can just kind of work down the line. So we answered the question about not-for-profits. The next one's from Omar, just saying sometimes it feels like success of an application depends more on how well it's written than the novelty and potential of the idea itself. Additionally, it often seems that assessors tend to favor larger organizations over smaller ones. Could you provide insights on how we can overcome these challenges and ensure that applications are evaluated fairly? I can kind of try that one first, unless you want to jump in, Rod. But fundamentally, the success of an application is on how well it's written, because the assessors they're looking at how well you can kind of describe the novelty and potential of the idea and how you talk about it, because they don't know anything about your organization. So let me see, and then favoring large organizations. I don't necessarily think it's favoring large organizations. I think large organizations have more resource to put into actually applying for the grant. So it is just it's a fundamental issue of resourcing. For smaller organizations to overcome these challenges, really kind of use the resources that are available to you. So if it's an Innovate grant, using the Innovate Business Connect, using from the Launchpad, using the Cluster Management Office if you can to help. I know it's just really trying to identify and utilize the resources available to you, really. I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add to that, Rod.
No, I get the point. Right? The bit that sort of hit me was that, larger organizations against smaller. It's challenging in that often, say, larger or more established have got a track record, so they can build a foot and resource, so they can put more into a grant application in the forms of evidence of track record, etc. So you've got to sort of counter that where you can by really showing where if you're a new or small organization, why you're absolutely in the zone for this particular grant, and why you could be fast moving, insightful on that piece. Maybe it's also showing how you could have external advisors who could help strengthen a smaller organization. I don't think it's favored on purpose. is usually driven by the innovation, but it's about the process allows for more evidence to be used by someone who's got more of a track record, might swing it. So try to think how you can counter that would be my point. Actually being small and nimble and reactive and fully concentrating on a project could score good marks, I think.
Mm-hmm. So Faith asked, are the questions evaluated on a question-by-question basis, or do they take into account all of the questions / answers in a linear way? So it's difficult to answer all bullet points for one question within only 400 words. So would other answers be considered as part of those bullet points, basically? I'll leave that one with you, Rod. I think you're probably better placed to answer that.
I think they tend to score question by. I think Gail's gone down further on and answer. It's question by question, so they'll look specifically at that question. So actually, again, I'm sympathetic, and sometimes you've got to repeat yourself. You can't say refer to question 3 when you're answering question 5, or you've just got to. It comes across. It feels a bit strange, but you do need to repeat yourself and be quite clear that you're answering that question. And like the example I used, I think it's a real challenge to have 7 bullet points, quite challenging bullet points in a 400-word answer there. But that is the challenge, and if you can do it, you're in a good place over others. And there may be a lot more you may want to say on that particular question or one particular bullet point, but you've just got to be disciplined to say, right, I've got 50 words to give the proper as punchy as possible on that answer. You may say, well, I'm going to use 75 words on that one because I know the next one, say, like I said, the export one, you could do that in 10 words because you've got a strategy, that will answer that question. But they'll be scoring it on a question by question piece.
Cool. Thanks, Rod. And then Dave just asked about using funding to hire equipment rather than purchasing as capital for longer term usage. And to be honest, that's going to depend on the grant itself that you're applying for, and you'd have to speak with the actual funders to get clarification on that. I've had experiences where you can't. You could subcontract somebody to do the work for you, but you can't actually hire equipment yourself. I've had other one, and you'd have to purchase capital. I've had other ones where you don't have to purchase capital. You can hire. It just depends on the funder. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to read the small print, I'm afraid, on those ones because it can change. And the approach you may want might fit. It might not be so good. Ask early, I think, is the best for clarification. Okay.
Cool.
Good. I think we're pretty much there. Gone through the questions. And last call for questions. Otherwise, we'll call it a day there. As I say, next time we're looking about actually managing projects. We've got a good panel coming. People who've had funding and will be have delivered innovation projects themselves, and also monitoring officers about that interaction. So I think there'll be some really good insights for people looking at this who might be either looking to get grants, recently won grants, about how to help manage that. Okay. Right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Recording will be available shortly. We'll just tidy it up, and the slides will be available as well. So watch this space. We'll send something to your inboxes once it's ready. Okay, cheers now.
Thanks, everyone.